Hello! So, as my regular viewer knows, I recently threw in the towel with Moto Guzzi after 3 years with my V85 TT and before that about 3 years with a V7. In fact, after over 10 years only riding Italian bikes, I decided it was time to return to the Japanese fold in search of reliability and some kind of accessible dealer network. So this video is my early impressions of the NC750X after the first 4 or so months of ownership. It's sort of a review of the bike, but there are loads already on YouTube. So if you want something professional, there's plenty of options. You all know that it has excellent fuel economy. You all know about the storage compartment, or the frunk, or the fruit, or whatever you want to call it. You all know that it's available in manual and with DCT automatic transmission. So all I can give you are my experiences so far after a few months and a couple of thousand miles. So why did I buy it? What were my first impressions? What are some good and bad points? What's the DCT like in everyday use? Is it an adventure bike, as Honda insist? And most importantly, is it the dullest bike in existence? If any of that oils your chain, stick around to find out more. Oh, and because there's a risk this video will go on for far too long, I'll put chapters in the doobly-doo down below so you can skip ahead to anything that interests you. I've parked up literally, and I do mean literally, in the middle of bloody nowhere, and cars keep driving past. Anyway. Why did I buy it? Well, I've documented my issues with Piaggio dealers well enough in the past, so watch some of my previous videos if you want more details on that. I was getting my V85 TT serviced and the garage made no effort to attempt to investigate a small issue I'd raised when I took it in for service. In fact, they told me it was all fine. And you will, of course, not be surprised to hear that the issue was still present on the not inconsiderable ride home. I made a snap decision then and there that I'd had enough. I'd already thought about the NC750X as a possible replacement for reasons of practicality, reliability and cost, you know. And I'd already ridden about 150 miles on a DCT version in the past and quite fancied one. A few speculative emails about stock levels and part exchanges were sent to various dealers. As expected, these were roundly ignored by almost all of them. The only dealer to respond was helpful with my questions, offered a part exchange I was happy with, and they got the sale. It's that easy, dealers. Just offer an actual decent service. You can make money. Who knew? So a few months back, I became the owner of a 2024 model NC750X DCT. What were my first impressions? Well, on the ride home from the dealer, my genuine first impression was, "F*** me, are these the same roads I rode here on? Did they get 10 times worse in the last hour?" Okay, that's a slight exaggeration, but the roads definitely felt rougher on the way home. The suspension is definitely in the budget range on this bike. I realised how spoilt I was by the suspension on the V85. It was much better at hiding the perilous state of the UK's crumbling road network. My second impression was how relaxing the bike is to ride. The low revving engine and DCT make this quite a relaxing bike to ride on the open road. I'll talk more about the DCT later on though. And my third impression was I'm going to have to get used to a slightly more cramped riding position than I'm used to. The angles and distance between bars, pegs and seat are obviously different to things like the V85, though plenty of people find this to be a comfy bike, so I'm sure it'll be fine longer term. Incidentally, you'll see a lot of people complaining about the seat online. I think this mostly relates to the pre-2021 models as far as I can tell. In no particular order, here are a few good bad things about the bike. Remember, no bike's perfect. These are just my opinions based on my experience so far. Though as always, tell me I'm wrong and a complete moron in the comments down below, if it makes you feel better. So fuel economy, as everyone knows, it's just really good. The V85 was great, but this is greater. I've not tested the range fully, but 200 miles seems a reasonable, safe mileage to reach before filling up. And the tank is 9 litres smaller than the one on the Guzzi, I think. 65 miles per gallon if you're absolutely thrashing it. I don't know, up to 100 miles per gallon if you're riding gently. Now the tyres. These are Dunlop Trailmax D609. And to be fair, they've gripped very well so far. But unfortunately, I think Honda have pulled the trick of fitting special OEM tyres to save some money. After, well, only not quite 2,000 miles, there's only 2 millimetres of tread left in the middle of the tyre. I'm pretty sure there wasn't much more than that when they were brand new. When I last looked at Dunlop's website, they don't even acknowledge that these tyres exist. So I assume they're a cheap tyre, especially for Honda, probably other brands, with less tread than you get with a retail tyre, and perhaps a softer compound as well, just to flatter on test rides. Whatever the truth is, I'm going to have to shell out for new tyres within 6 months of buying the bike. So shame on you, Honda, for cheaping out like this. I don't think it's acceptable really, but it just seems common practice, so I don't think we have much choice in the matter. It doesn't look good on Dunlop either. I mean, why would I buy Dunlop tyres if my first experience of them is that they just don't last more than a couple of thousand miles? So the instrument cluster on this is pretty basic, as you'll have seen in real reviews of this bike. I actually find that quite refreshing. I find it far less distracting than some of the gaudy displays on other bikes. Looking at you, Triumph Tiger. It does lack a temperature reading, which is hardly essential, but is nice to have. And it also doesn't have any range indication. I know these can be accurate, but again, it's nice to have that. It's legible in nearly all conditions so far, the only exception being low autumn sun coming from behind you. At certain angles, the screen becomes a mirror and you get blinded by the reflection. But luckily, that doesn't happen very often in Wales. There's no automatic night mode. You have to change the brightness manually. It took me a while to decipher the owner's manual to work out how to actually do that, but it works well enough. And finally, there's the mystical line, which is hiding up here somewhere. And it flashes when you do things. By default, it's sort of an eco gauge, going green, blue, red as it criticises or praises your riding. And like all these sorts of things, it's completely useless. It can also act as, I think, a rev warning shift light, which is probably more relevant on the manual bikes. And it can show which riding mode you're in by colour, which soon becomes annoying, especially as one of the colours is blue. So if you're in that particular mode, it looks like you've got full beam headlights on all the time. I soon turned the whole thing off in disgust, as none of those modes are any use, in my opinion. However, it's not really off. Honda almost made it useful. When you hit reserve, it comes on orange. Brilliant! A low fuel light. It's finally actually useful. Except it only stays on for a short while, then switches off. So if you don't happen to notice that it came on, then the only warning that you're getting low on fuel is a small square flashing dimly in the corner of the display. Hot Black Desiato would approve, I'm sure. I got the OEM heated grips fitted when I bought the bike, as I think they're essential if you ride all year round in the UK. I went with OEM as they're a straight plug-and-play solution and integrate with the wiring loom, fuse box and display without any issues. They work well and have 5 levels of heat, and whilst not up to the level of, say, BMW grips, they do get very hot on the maximum setting. They also remember their last setting, so when you switch the bike back on and reactivate them, they'll be at the same level you last used them at. When you switch them on, it only shows very briefly in the display which level you're at. Don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but around about there, you switch the grips on. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's come up with a 2 and the heated grip symbol. And now the 2 has disappeared. They also have a green LED on the button, which when you switch it on flashes the number of times to match the level. So here this is on level 3. So you do have a reminder on there as well. It only flashes for a little while and eventually stays on as a solid green light. I've got 3 issues with them though. 1 specific to me and 2 more general. They're quite narrow. I find I can get cramp if I'm not careful, something I never experienced in the V85. I've not measured them, but I think it's because I have to curl my hands over more to grip them. It's not really a fault of the grips per se, just that I struggle with my manly hands. It could be the winter gloves as well, just not being as flexible. Also, this LED, although it doesn't look it on video here, is really bright at night and very distracting. I can see me employing some electrical tape over the top if I have to do a lot of riding in the dark. It's fine around town where there's street lights, but when you're out on the open road in the dark, I just find it super bright. And the final issue is the angle they've been installed at. The switch would be easier to hit if it was a little lower down, more rotated towards the rider, in my opinion. Also, the cable that comes out the left-hand grip here is just in the wrong position to rub against the side of my thumb when I'm riding, so I have to adjust my hand position. Again, if the grips were rotated a bit, both these issues would be resolved. However, I've seen a few bikes, and this seems to be the position they're always installed in, so I don't know if the bar is pinned or if they just say in instructions this is how you put them on. If I was fitting them myself, I'd definitely want to test fit and check those angles first, and maybe angle them down a bit. I also got the official Honda USB port fitted, because in this day and age we all have devices that might need charging on the go. Again, I went with OEM as it's plug and play, the wiring looms in place, etc. It lives inside the storage compartment down here, so it's protected from the elements. It also has this rubber cap, which bugs me because it's attached at the bottom and doesn't fit well. So it's most of the time it just kind of falls off and flaps around like that. Why is it not attached at the top? And no, you can't just pop the unit out and turn it over. It's keyed to fit only one way. I think they must have used the same intern that designed the stupid flashing line on the display. It's such a minor thing, but attention to detail would have been nice here. I know, flame me in the comments for being picky. The switchgear is refreshingly simple for a modern bike. I wish it had cruise control, and an aftermarket option is available now for those that can't live without it. The only thing I've had to get used to really is the old school headlight switch for main beam and flash. I've got used to there being a lever on the back of the switch cluster on most modern bikes for main beam and light flash. With the DCT though, of course, you've got the change up, change down buttons in these positions. To be fair, it's very retro. That's where it always used to be on bikes I owned back in the day. On A-roads, the DCT is very smooth, certainly at A-road speeds. I think it really suits the engine on this bike. You can pin the throttle for an overtake and let it do its thing whilst you concentrate on everything else. Apparently, Honda lowered the gearing on the first 3 gears for the 21 Plus bikes, I believe. Around town, it's not quite as good in my experience. The actual gear changes are still smooth. The pickup from a standstill and the transition between clutches is very, very smooth. But it's kind of clunky and noisy at slow speed in the first 3 gears. Also, the 20 limits, which we now have to suffer everywhere in Wales, means it wants to swap between second and third quite a lot. In fact, every modern bike I've ridden in the last few years is crap at 20 miles an hour and fine at 30. Changing riding modes to rain sometimes help smooth out jerky fuel injection systems, though I found. In fact, let's talk a bit about the riding modes, as they do change the character of the bike quite a lot, so are worth experimenting with. It always resets to standard mode after every engine stop, and I think this is where a lot of criticism comes from, as when you're used to riding a manually geared bike, it definitely feels like it changes up too early and labours the engine. I choose to believe that Honda have designed it to be fine like this, but it's unnerving when you're used to the manual way of doing things. In fact, I often use manual mode when starting just to avoid it trying to change up to a high gear on a cold engine on a hill near my house. Once you're cruising along, standard mode is absolutely fine. It's certainly the most fuel efficient, and on a normal A-road ride that's what I would use. Sport mode is an interesting one. It definitely livens up the bike and the gearbox, and if you're doing lots of overtakes and riding spiritedly, then this is probably the mode you want. However, on the sort of twisty minor A and B roads that surround mid-Wales, it's got a few issues. Specifically the down changes. If you brake not even that hard, if you start to slow down reasonably firmly from speed in sport mode, it will very aggressively change down through the gears. And I don't know about you, but I don't tend to slam into second gear at 40 miles an hour when I'm approaching a bend, but this will do that if you brake reasonably sharply. This quickly becomes tiring on some of the roads around here. It's the engine braking that's the real problem. On a manual bike, I'd change down a couple of gears and leave it there. But say the DCT rapidly dropping down through the gearbox, if it thinks you're slowing down fast, is not ideal for my riding style. Interestingly, it also never wants to change above 5th in sport mode, at least not at any legal speeds I've achieved on the Welsh roads. I think sport mode works best on sort of more sweeping, open, fast A roads where you can ride more smoothly. Although it does sound good as it's power blipping its way down through the gearbox, so there is that. Rain mode is your usual tippy-toe mode for slippery conditions, maximum traction control, very soft throttle response. I actually sometimes use it around town, as I've mentioned. It kind of softens up the throttle, so in the endless 20 limits in Wales on the bumpy roads, it seems to make the bike a little bit smoother to ride. And finally, you've got user mode. And after some experimentation, I've tried to turn this into my Goldilocks mode to suit the types of roads that I encounter around here. Essentially, I've set it to maximum power, maximum traction control, because why would you have anything else? This bike doesn't have loads and loads of power. Not quite the highest DC, oh, the engine's off at the moment, so it's not showing it, but it's one down from the highest DCT setting, just to calm down the downshift a little. And engine braking to a minimum, so that when it does decide it's changing down 3 gears, you don't get that lurching with the sudden engine braking kicking in. It works for me anyway. I suggest you try playing around with the user mode if you're not happy with the way the DCT is working for you. Incidentally, it's a shame you can't change the settings for upshifts and downshifts separately, because the upshifts are fine. I would just like to tone down the downshift part of it, only in sort of sporty modes. The rest of the time it's fine. There is one issue that you need to be aware of and I didn't expect, but I think you need to be cautious about it. And it is operator error, but it's easy to do if you're not careful. A couple of times I've had to pull over into a lay-by, much like the one I'm in now, with a gravelly, slippery surface. And then I've suddenly had ABS activating and the bike trying to surge forwards, and what the hell was going on? I couldn't work it out for a little while. I soon realised, though, that what's happening is that as I was reaching for the brake, I was very slightly opening the throttle, and the gearbox picks up at very, very minimal throttle openings. So, of course, the bike was trying to drive forwards as I was braking, and then the ABS was kicking in because the surface wasn't good. So the bike kept moving forwards. I think having bulky winter gloves on didn't really help either. I've adjusted the brake lever inwards a little bit, and that seems to have helped a lot. So it's just something to be aware of and careful with. As I said, it's operator error, but easily done if you're not paying attention or if you're not used to the bike. Okay then, is this an adventure bike? It took me a while to find this bike on Honda's website when I was first looking. It turns out that they have decided that it is an adventure bike. Honestly, this is a road bike. Sticking on a plastic pouty bottom lip does not an adventure bike make. Now, hang on a gosh darn minute. Before you all start typing angrily down below, what I'm trying to say here is, in my opinion, this is not an adventure bike in the current marketing speak. It doesn't have the plush long travel suspension, it's not covered in spotlights, it doesn't have wire wheels, chunky tyres. To the best of my knowledge, Ewan and Charlie never rode one. Showing my age there. The reality, of course, is any bike can be an adventure bike. Just ask Ed March and his C90, or Matt and Reese, the sidecar guys, and their ridiculous scooter outfit. Nick Sanders on his R1, or maybe even Ted Simon. Look him up if you're too young to recognise that name. So is this an adventure bike in the style that the marketing wonks are pushing these days? Personally, I'd say not really. Is it a bike you can have adventures on? Oh, 100% yes. Get out there and ride, people. Have adventures. Live life. I mean, unless you've got a GS, of course, then maybe just go and hang out at the Super Sausage and compare your BMW branded underpants with each other whilst bragging about who has the largest finance payments. I don't know. If that doesn't get the comment section going, I don't know what will. Well then, is it the dullest bike in existence? Thank you to a Reddit commenter on Moto UK, I think, for providing me with the title of this video. I sometimes hear a very dismissive attitude to the NC, and it's kind of sad really. Some people have blinkers on and can't see beyond the relatively low horsepower figures and, you know, the low revving engine, and think that it means it's a boring commuter bike. Of course, if you're the sort of person who polishes your knee pads with an angle grinder in the shed at night and has to ride everywhere as if your pants are on fire, or if you can't live without a screaming engine, a childish exhaust and near-death experiences around every bend, yes, I see you all here every week in Wales doing that, then this definitely isn't the bike for you. Is it a good commuter? Of course, it's bloody-mindedly practical for sure. For me, I've discovered a different kind of joy in riding this bike in the few months I've had it. The enjoyment for me is that it's relaxing to ride. I can enjoy the act of the ride itself. The bike almost fades into the background. Now you're sitting there thinking that that proves it's boring or forgettable, and I counter that with it. It shows the bike is pretty well set up. You're not fighting it, it's just doing its job and allowing you to enjoy travelling through the countryside and other aspects of the ride. As I've said before, the DCT especially suits this engine, I think. And you may be screaming boring at your screen, and that's fine. We have choices. Choose whatever suits you. I don't think this is the dullest bike in existence, far from it. I think this is what back in the day we used to call an motorcycle. Just a good all-round jump on it and go kind of bike. So, if anyone has actually made it this far, thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll make a few more videos about this bike. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed there's a few accessories bolted to it already. I might document some of the trials and tribulations of fitting a few of those if people are interested. Thanks for watching. Hopefully see you again soon. Oh yes, all the like and subscribe BS that I have to say as a YouTuber. I don't know, apathetic bloody planet. I forgot to add, of course, if you're in the market for a bike like this, you will know that Honda have just announced a new model for 2025 with a TFT screen, presumably the same one that's on the 500. So it'll be interesting to get an up-close look at that when it comes out and compare it to this 2024 model. I've got no plans to change this for now. I'm quite happy with it so far, but you never know. You never know.